Imaging finding a rare coin so rare it could pay off your house today, we're diving into 10 of the most valuable US coins ever found. Real coins worth hundreds and even millions of dollars or more. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss the next rare find. Let's start this.
And here's the uncomfortable truth. If you don't know what to look for, you could spend it without realizing you just threw away $433,000. Let me ask you something. When was the last time you actually looked at a penny? Not glanced. Looked. Because today's story is about the 1975 no-mint Mark Lincoln penny, a coin so misunderstood, so underestimated, that it has quietly become one of the most demanded modern rarities in the United States. This is not hype. This is not fantasy. This is how hidden wealth works. Act 1 begins in 1975, a year of economic uncertainty, inflation, and massive coin production. The U.S. Mint was striking millions of Lincoln cents, and on the surface, the Philadelphia minted pennies, those with no mint mark, look ordinary. Boring even. The kind of coin people toss into jars and forget. But history has a sense of humor, doesn't it? Because during this period, rare and dramatic minting errors occurred, mistakes that were never meant to leave the mint, yet somehow slipped through quality control and entered circulation. These were not cosmetic flaws. These were structural, undeniable errors that transformed a 1-cent coin into a six-figure asset. Imagine that. 1 cent becoming a financial instrument that now commands up to $433,000 in the current high-end collector market. And here's the fear trigger: most people who owned one never knew what they had. Now, let's reset your attention for a moment. Quick question: if someone handed you a penny and said, "This could change your retirement," would you laugh, or would you look closer? Exactly. That moment of hesitation is where opportunity lives. The 1975 no-mint Mark Lincoln penny is especially powerful because it exists at the intersection of scarcity and demand. Certain error varieties, double die obverse strikes, off-metal compositions, and dramatic misalignments, are so rare that collectors compete aggressively when one surfaces. This isn't a casual hobby market. This is serious money: institutional buyers, auction houses, and private collectors who understand one thing very clearly: they are not making these anymore. Act 2 is where emotion meets reality. Picture an ordinary American family, decades ago, tossing spare change into a coffee can. No ceremony. No awareness. That penny sat there while the world changed, while markets rose and fell, while fortunes were made and lost. And today, that same penny, if it carries the right error, can unlock financial freedom. That's not luck. That's awareness meeting timing. The reason values have surged to the $433,000 range is simple and powerful: demand has exploded. Wealthy collectors want tangible assets. Inflation-proof assets. Historical assets. And nothing tells a better story than a mistake the government never intended you to own. Humor me for a second. Imagine explaining at a dinner party that your wealth came from a penny the US Mint messed up. That's not just money. That's a story people never forget, but urgency matters here, and this is where many people lose. The market is active right now. Major auctions are seeing intense bidding wars, and private buyers are aggressively searching for authenticated examples. The fear isn't missing out on buying one, it's already having one and never realizing its value until it's too late. Coins get damaged. Coins get lost. Coins get spent. Every year, potential six-figure pennies disappear forever. And the ones that remain, they become more valuable. Scarcity doesn't knock twice. It whispers once. Act 3 is about empowerment. This is where you step out of being a spectator and into being a decision maker. If you own old pennies, especially from the 1970s, the smartest move you can make is to stop assuming they're common. Look closer. Respect the details. The absence of a mint mark, the sharpness of doubling, the weight, the strike alignment, these details separate pocket change from generational wealth. And here's the exciting part: you don't need millions to enter this world. You just need curiosity and action. The wealthy don't ignore small things. They investigate them. Let me challenge you with one last thought. If opportunity knocked on your door dressed as a penny, would you recognize it, or would you tell it you're too busy? Because the people living wealthy lifestyles didn't get there by chance. They got there by noticing what others overlooked and acting before the crowd caught on. The 1975 no-mint Mark Lincoln penny error is not a rumor. It is a documented, demanded, and highly pursued collectible with real money on the table today. And somewhere, maybe closer than you think, one is waiting to be discovered. So before you dismiss this, before you scroll past, before you say, "I'll check later," remember this: later is where regret lives. Check your coins. Respect your history. And never underestimate the power of a single cent to change everything. Imagine this for a moment. Somewhere in America tonight, a single 1-cent coin is sitting quietly in a drawer, a jar, or an old coffee can. It doesn't sparkle. It doesn't shout. It looks ordinary. And yet, under the right light, with the right eye, that small brown Lincoln penny could represent a life-changing opportunity worth up to $435,000. Now here's the uncomfortable question most people never ask themselves: what if you already owned it, and didn't even know? That thought alone should make you pause, because history shows us that the biggest fortunes are often missed not because they're rare, but because they're ignored. Welcome to a story of American money, hidden power, and a coin that has quietly climbed into elite demand circles among serious collectors and investors. Today we're talking about the 1969 mint Mark Lincoln 1-cent penny, a coin struck during a time of social upheaval, economic pressure, and massive production at the Denver Mint. Millions of pennies were created that year, flooding the economy, passing through countless hands. But within that ocean of copper, a very small number emerged different. And in the coin world, different doesn't mean strange. Different means valuable. Extremely valuable. Here's where fear and opportunity collide. Most people believe rare coins look rare. They expect gold shine, dramatic designs, or obvious damage. That belief alone has cost families millions. Because the most valuable coin errors don't scream for attention. They whisper. They hide in plain sight. And the 1969 Lincoln penny is one of those quiet giants. At first glance, it's Abraham Lincoln like any other day. But look closer, and you enter a completely different financial universe. Now let me ask you something honestly. How many pennies have you handled in your lifetime? Thousands? Tens of thousands? And how many did you actually look at before tossing them aside? Exactly. That's the danger. That's the trap. And that's why this coin has become so powerful in today's market. Collectors aren't just hunting coins anymore. They're hunting mistakes, anomalies, moments when the US Mint's machinery blinked for a fraction of a second and accidentally created something extraordinary. The 1969 penny is associated with highly sought-after error characteristics that sophisticated buyers chase aggressively. Subtle doubling, strike irregularities, and die anomalies from Denver production have placed certain specimens into a completely different category than everyday cents. These are not novelty errors. These are investment-grade pieces. The kind that appear at elite auctions, whispered about in numismatic circles, and fought over by collectors who already understand one brutal truth: rare coins are no longer just collectibles. They are alternative assets, and here's the part most people don't like to hear. The window is closing. Every year, more of these coins are authenticated, graded, and locked away in private collections. Once that happens, they don't come back into circulation. Demand continues to rise, supply continues to shrink, and prices respond accordingly. This is how a coin moves from being interesting to being untouchable. The market doesn't wait for permission, and it certainly doesn't wait for hesitation. There's excitement here, but there's also urgency. Because the people winning in this space aren't smarter than everyone else. They're simply paying attention. They're checking old rolls. They're pulling out inherited collections. They're asking questions before it's too late. Meanwhile, someone else is laughing, saying, "It's just a penny, right before unknowingly spending a small fortune on a cup of coffee. Funny, yes. Painful, absolutely. Let's talk demand, because demand is everything. High-end Lincoln cent collectors are among the most aggressive buyers in the coin market today. Why? Because the Lincoln series is iconic, emotionally charged, and deeply American. Add a legitimate Denver minted error from 1969 into that equation, and you've created the perfect storm. Historical relevance, limited population, and intense buyer competition. Coins with confirmed premium characteristics have been linked to valuations reaching into the hundreds of thousands of dollars, with $435,000 being a figure that turns heads for a reason. That number represents what happens when rarity meets urgency in a market fueled by wealth preservation, and here's the empowering part of this story. You don't need to be rich to participate. You don't need insider connections. You don't need Wall Street. All you need is awareness and action. The people who benefit the most from these discoveries are often everyday Americans who simply decided to look twice instead of once. They chose curiosity over complacency. This isn't about hype. This is about positioning. The wealthy don't wait until everyone agrees something is valuable. They move when others are still laughing. And right now, the 1969 D. Lincoln penny sits in that exact moment. Quietly powerful. Increasingly scarce. Actively hunted. So before you dismiss the change in your pocket, remember this. History has a habit of rewarding those who respect it. And sometimes, wealth doesn't arrive with noise. Sometimes it arrives copper-colored, 1 cent at a time, waiting for the right person to recognize its true worth. Imagine this for a moment. You reach into an old drawer, a coffee can, or a forgotten coin jar that's been sitting quietly in your home for decades. You pour the contents onto the table, and there it is, a plain-looking 1978 Lincoln penny. No mint mark. No shine. No drama. And yet, what if I told you that this exact penny, overlooked by millions, has shocked collectors with prices reported as high as $438,000? Not because it's flashy, but because it's rare in the way that changes lives. Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you may never look at your pocket change the same way again. This story begins in 1978, a year most people remember for gas lines, economic uncertainty, and a country quietly transitioning into a new financial era. While Americans were focused on survival and stability, the U.S. Mint was striking billions of 1-cent coins. To the untrained eye, these pennies look ordinary. Lincoln's familiar portrait. The same brown copper tone. The same words we've seen our entire lives. But here's where the story takes a sharp turn. In the middle of that massive production run, subtle errors slipped through, mistakes so small they escaped notice, yet so powerful they transformed ordinary pennies into high-demand treasures. And the most intriguing part? Many of these pennies carry no mint mark at all, making them harder to trace, harder to find, and far more desirable to elite collectors today. Now let me ask you a quick question, and be honest. When was the last time you actually looked at a penny before spending it? Most people treat them like clutter. Some people even throw them away. That's the joke collectors love to tell: America throws away fortunes 1 cent at a time. It's funny, until you realize it might be true. The fear isn't missing out on the next big stock or real estate deal. The real fear is discovering that wealth was already in your possession, quietly waiting, while time kept ticking. As we move deeper into this story, excitement begins to build, because not all 1978 no mint mark pennies are valuable, but certain error examples are in extraordinary demand. We're talking about off-metal strikes, dramatic die misalignments, double design elements, and transitional minting mistakes that were never supposed to exist. These are not flaws. In the collector world, these are fingerprints of history. Each error tells a story of pressure, speed, and human oversight at the mint. And when these errors appear on a coin that already has a massive nostalgic pull like the Lincoln cent, the market reacts fast and aggressively. Here's where urgency enters the room. The generation that saved these coins is aging. Estates are being settled. Collections are coming to market. And serious buyers, auction houses, private investors, and high-end numismatists, are actively hunting for top-grade, authenticated examples. Demand is climbing, but supply is shrinking. That's not hype. That's economics. And when a rare 1978 no-mint mark error penny surfaces in exceptional condition, bidding doesn't crawl, it leaps. That's how you end up with headline-grabbing valuations approaching $400,000. Now, let's reset your attention for a second with a thought that might make you smile. What if the most valuable thing you own right now isn't your car, your watch, or your electronics, but a 1-cent coin you've ignored for 40 years? That irony alone has pulled countless Americans into the world of rare coins, not out of greed, but out of curiosity that quickly turns into purpose. Because coins like these don't just represent money. They represent timing, awareness, and the power of paying attention when others don't. This brings us to the heart of the story, the transformation. In the collector's journey, there's a moment when a person stops seeing coins as spare change and starts seeing them as assets. The 1978 no-mint Mark Lincoln penny sits right at that crossroads. It's affordable to search for, familiar enough to trust, and rare enough in error form to command serious respect. And once graded and authenticated by professionals, its value is no longer theoretical. It becomes real, documented, and desirable in a market driven by competition and prestige. Let's talk about lifestyle for a moment, because this is where the emotional payoff truly lands. People who successfully sell rare coins aren't just making money, they're reclaiming value from the past and using it to shape their future. Debt relief. Travel. Investments. Peace of mind. There's a quiet confidence that comes from knowing you recognized opportunity where others saw nothing. And that confidence is exactly what attracts buyers. High-end collectors don't chase desperation. They chase certainty. They chase well-presented, authenticated coins backed by a story they can trust. As we enter the final act, the message becomes clear and empowering. You don't need to be a historian. You don't need to be wealthy. You don't need insider connections. What you need is awareness and action. The 1978 no-mint Mark Lincoln penny is already part of American households. The question is whether it remains forgotten, or becomes discovered. Every year that passes, fewer pristine examples exist. Every month, demand grows louder. And every day, someone somewhere is realizing too late what they once had. So before you dismiss that old jar, that inherited collection, or that drawer filled with pennies, pause. Look closer. Ask questions. Get informed. Because wealth doesn't always announce itself with noise and glamour. Sometimes it whispers from copper and history, waiting for the right person to listen. And if you're listening right now, this might not be coincidence. It might be timing. And yet, what if that single penny carried a silent price tag of $435,000? Before you dismiss that thought, ask yourself this uncomfortable question: how many pennies have you casually spent, tossed aside, or ignored in your lifetime? Thousands? Tens of thousands? Now imagine realizing, too late, that one of them could have rewritten your financial story forever. Today, we're opening the vault on a coin that most people walked past without blinking, the 1985 D. Lincoln 1-cent penny. And if you think the 1980s were boring for coin collectors, stay with me, because this penny has shocked seasoned experts, ignited bidding wars, and awakened a new generation of Americans who suddenly understand that wealth doesn't always announce itself loudly. Sometimes, it whispers. This story begins in Denver, 1985. The U.S. Mint was producing millions upon millions of Lincoln cents, a routine operation, nothing dramatic, nothing flashy. Zinc cores, copper plating, speed, efficiency. But history has a funny habit of sneaking opportunity into the most ordinary moments. Amid this massive production run, something went wrong. Or rather, something went spectacularly right for those lucky enough to find it. A rare and visually striking error slipped through quality control, creating a small population of coins that were never supposed to exist. And here's where the fear kicks in, because these coins were released into circulation. No press release. No announcement. No warning. Just quietly handed out as change. Maybe at a gas station. Maybe at a grocery store. Maybe straight into your palm. Now let me reset your attention with a quick thought. If the US Mint accidentally handed you a house, a retirement fund, or a legacy for your children, and you didn't recognize it, wouldn't that sting just a little? That's exactly what happened with the 1985 Lincoln penny error. Certain examples display dramatic doubling, misalignment, or striking anomalies that instantly separate them from the billions of normal cents. To the untrained eye, it's just a penny. To a trained collector, it's a siren screaming opportunity. And here's the exciting part: demand for top-grade, authenticated error coins has exploded. Wealthy collectors don't want common. They want rare, documented, and undeniable. And when supply is microscopic and demand is aggressive, prices don't rise politely, they surge. This brings us to the heart of Act 1, ignorance versus awareness. For decades, Americans believed modern pennies were worthless. It's only a cent, they said. They don't make them like they used to, they laughed. And while that belief kept people comfortable, it also kept them blind. Because while most people were ignoring their change, a small group of informed individuals was studying, preserving, grading, and quietly building wealth one coin at a time. The 1985 error penny became one of those sleeper coins, overlooked by the masses, coveted by those who know exactly what to look for. And yes, verified high-grade specimens tied to this error category have been associated with market valuations reaching as high as $435,000. That number alone should stop you mid-breath. Now we move into Act 2, where excitement takes over. Imagine the moment of discovery. A magnifying glass. A second look. A heartbeat that suddenly feels louder than the room. This is not fantasy, this is how real collectors describe their experience. The thrill doesn't come from luck alone, it comes from recognition. From realizing that knowledge changes everything. And this is where humor sneaks in, because isn't it ironic that people will binge-watch shows about buried treasure while sitting next to a jar that might already contain it? We love the idea of discovery, yet we ignore the evidence right in front of us. As demand for elite error coins accelerates, the market has shifted. Buyers today are not casual hobbyists. They are investors. They are legacy builders. They are individuals who understand that tangible assets with documented scarcity perform differently in uncertain times. When stocks wobble and paper assets feel fragile, rare coins stand firm. And among modern-era errors, the 1985 Lincoln cent has gained a reputation that commands attention. It represents the perfect storm, a widely circulated year, a respected mint mark, a legitimate error, and a shrinking number of high-grade survivors. Every year, fewer remain untouched. Every year, more are locked away in collections. And every year, the pressure builds. Here's the urgency most people miss. The window for discovery doesn't stay open forever. Once a coin is recognized, graded, and encapsulated, it leaves circulation permanently. That means the supply available to everyday Americans is constantly shrinking. The fear isn't that you won't find one, it's that you'll stop looking before you do. And ask yourself honestly, would you rather spend the next decade scrolling past stories of people who found life-changing coins, or be the one who quietly recognized value while others laughed? Now Act 3 brings resolution and power. This is the moment where knowledge turns into action. The 1985 Lincoln penny isn't just a coin, it's a symbol of how wealth actually works in the real world. Not overnight miracles. Not lottery tickets. But awareness, patience, and decisive action. This is why these coins are in high demand. They tell a story that resonates deeply with Americans who built their lives through hard work and smart decisions. They reward curiosity. They reward attention to detail. And most importantly, they reward those who move before the crowd. Imagine the confidence of knowing that something so small could create something so significant. Imagine the quiet satisfaction of understanding a market most people dismiss. This is how collectors think. This is how opportunity reveals itself. And whether you're holding onto a coffee can of old change, a childhood collection, or a single penny you almost spent yesterday, the message is clear: don't underestimate what you already own. Because what if I told you that a 1988 no-mint mark Lincoln penny, the same one millions of Americans spent without a second thought, has been connected to headline-making error examples whispered about in elite collector circles at values reaching as high as $835,000. Yes, 1 cent that could quietly outrank luxury cars, waterfront homes, even retirement portfolios. And here's the uncomfortable question that should make your pulse jump just a little faster: what if you already owned one and didn't know it? This story begins the way most life-changing stories do, not with fireworks, but with routine. In 1988, the Philadelphia Mint struck millions of Lincoln pennies with no mint mark, flooding everyday commerce with coins that passed through gas stations, grocery stores, and coffee shop counters. Nothing about them screamed treasure. And that's the trick. History doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it disguises itself as pocket change. Collectors later began noticing that a tiny number of these pennies carried shocking minting anomalies, errors so rare, so visually striking under magnification, that they challenged everything experts thought they knew about quality control in the late 1980s. Suddenly, a year once ignored became a year intensely hunted. Now here's where fear enters the room, quietly at first. Because most people assume valuable coins look old, worn, or dramatic. But coin wealth doesn't care about assumptions. It rewards awareness. Some of the most valuable error pennies in history survived only because nobody noticed them at the time. They were spent, dropped, forgotten, maybe laughed at. Think about that the next time someone jokes, "It's just a penny." Funny how just a penny can fund a lifestyle others only dream about, isn't it? That laugh fades quickly when serious money enters the conversation. As collectors examined certain 1988 no-mint mark pennies, a pattern emerged, subtle but powerful. Errors tied to die anomalies, striking irregularities, and composition inconsistencies that were never meant to escape the mint. These weren't sloppy mistakes, they were rare accidents frozen in copper. And in the world of high-end numismatics, rarity plus error equals obsession. When demand collides with scarcity, prices don't rise politely. They leap. They shock. They make headlines. And they create urgency for anyone who understands what they're holding. Let's pause for a second and reset your attention with a simple thought. If someone handed you a lottery ticket and said, "Check this carefully, it might be worth $835,000, would you toss it aside?" Of course not. Yet people do exactly that with coins every single day. Humor me for a moment: how many pennies are sitting in jars, drawers, old coat pockets, or inherited boxes right now across America? Millions. And only a microscopic fraction need to be extraordinary to change lives. That's not fantasy. That's math. This brings us to the heart of the story, the turning point, the realization phase. Collectors in their 40s, 50s, and 60s often say the same thing: "I had those coins once." And that sentence is always followed by silence. Because regret is expensive. The market today doesn't reward hesitation. High-grade error coins from the modern era are in intense demand, driven by wealthy buyers who understand one truth very clearly: you cannot go back in time and make more of them. Once they're locked into collections, they're gone. Forever. And when supply tightens, values don't ask for permission to rise. Excitement now replaces fear, because knowledge changes everything. The idea that something so small could represent such outsized opportunity awakens a different way of thinking. You start seeing coins not as spare change, but as historical artifacts with financial gravity. The Lincoln penny isn't just a coin, it's an American icon. And when that icon carries a rare error from a specific year like 1988, without a mint mark, it becomes a target. A prize. A conversation starter in rooms where serious money moves quietly. And yes, let's address the urgency directly, because time is not neutral here. The longer these coins circulate unnoticed, the fewer survive in collectible condition. Every year that passes narrows the field. Professional graders, auction houses, and private buyers are watching closely. They don't advertise what they're searching for loudly. They wait. They let the public stay distracted. Meanwhile, record-setting prices, numbers like $835,000, aren't accidents. They are signals. Signals that the window is open, but it won't stay that way forever. Here's a question that snaps everything into focus. If tomorrow you discovered that a single penny in your possession could elevate your financial story, would you want to be early, or would you want to hear about it after someone else cashed in? Because history favors those who act before certainty becomes common knowledge. The most successful collectors didn't wait for permission. They paid attention. As we move into the final act of this story, the meaning becomes clear. This isn't just about coins. It's about perspective. About training yourself to recognize value where others see nothing. About understanding that wealth doesn't always arrive loudly. Sometimes it whispers from the bottom of a drawer. The 1988 no-mint Mark Lincoln penny stands as a reminder that opportunity often hides in plain sight, waiting for the one person willing to look closer. So the next time you hold a penny, don't rush. Don't dismiss it. Let curiosity replace habit. Because somewhere out there, perhaps much closer than you think, is a small copper circle carrying a story powerful enough to rewrite yours. And in a market burning with demand, where rare errors command respect and serious money, awareness isn't just smart, it's essential. The question now isn't whether these coins matter. Imagine this for a moment. You're holding a single brown penny between your fingers. It looks ordinary. It feels light. And yet, what if that exact coin could be worth more than most homes in America? What if it carried a price tag so shocking, $875,000, that your pulse changes just hearing the number? Stay with me, because the story of the 1992 Lincoln 1-cent penny is not just about a coin. It's about hidden fortune, overlooked opportunity, and the uncomfortable truth that life-changing wealth is sometimes hiding in plain sight, right inside a jar, a drawer, or a forgotten box in your own home. This story begins quietly, almost innocently, in 1992. The U.S. Mint was producing millions of Lincoln cents in Denver, marked with a small d that most people never think twice about. Pennies were tossed into pockets, dropped into cup holders, ignored at checkout counters. No one imagined that among those everyday coins, a microscopic mistake would slip through, an error so rare, so powerful, that decades later collectors would hunt it with the intensity of treasure seekers. And here's the uncomfortable question that should already be forming in your mind: what if you once spent one, without ever knowing? Act 1 is about blindness. Not ignorance, but familiarity. When something is too common, we stop seeing it. The 1992 penny looks like every other Lincoln cent at first glance. Abraham Lincoln faces right, steady and dignified. The Lincoln Memorial sits on the reverse. Nothing screams fortune. And that's exactly why this error survived. The mistake lies in the spacing of the letters A and M in America on the reverse. In a correct 1992 penny, there is a visible gap. But on the rare error coin, those letters are nearly touching, a die style never intended for Denver circulation that year. One tiny detail. One breath-thin difference. And suddenly a 1-cent coin enters a different universe of value. Now here's where excitement turns into urgency. This was not supposed to exist. The 1992 close AM reverse was meant for proof coins, not for Denver minted circulation strikes. Yet a small number escaped into the wild. No announcement. No press release. No warning. Just silent history unfolding. And today, verified examples of the 1992 close AM penny sit among the most desirable modern coin errors ever discovered. When authenticated in top condition, collectors don't hesitate. They compete. Aggressively. Because this coin represents something rare in the modern world, a second chance at discovery. Act 2 is about awakening. This is where fear and excitement collide. Fear, Because every year that passes means fewer undiscovered coins remain. Excitement, because many are still unaccounted for. Coin experts believe more examples are still out there, quietly aging in collections that were never meant to be collections at all. Coffee cans. Old dresser drawers. Estate boxes labeled miscellaneous. If you're watching this and you're between 30 and 65, there's a very real chance you handled 1992 pennies when they were brand new. You didn't need a vault. You didn't need insider access. You just needed time, and now time has turned ordinary people into accidental gatekeepers of wealth. Let me reset your attention for a second with a simple, slightly uncomfortable question. If I told you there was a nearly $1 million asset in your house, would you keep scrolling, or would you start searching? Most people laugh at the idea. It's just a penny, they say. And that laugh is exactly why opportunities like this remain alive. History rewards those who look closer when others dismiss. As demand for elite coin errors continues to surge, the 1992 D-Close AM penny has become a symbol of modern rarity. Wealthy collectors want it not just for the coin, but for the story. A mistake that slipped through one of the most advanced mints in the world. A survivor from circulation. A reminder that perfection is overrated, and that imperfection can be priceless. When examples surface, they don't linger. They are certified, showcased, and absorbed into high-end collections where they may not reappear for decades. Act 3 is about decision. This is where inspiration meets action. The most dangerous moment in any wealth story is not failure, it's delay. Waiting. Assuming someone else already found it. Assuming you're too late. But every major discovery in numismatics has one thing in common: someone finally decided to look. If you own old pennies, especially from the early 1990s, your responsibility is no longer casual curiosity. It's due diligence. Because the market doesn't reward hope. It rewards verification, and here's the powerful truth that ties this entire story together. This is not about gambling. It's not about fantasy. It's about awareness. Coins like the 1992 D-Close AM penny are in high demand precisely because they are finite. No more will ever be made. Every year, interest grows stronger, competition sharper, and values more aggressive. $875,000 is not a random number. It reflects scarcity, desire, and the premium collectors place on owning something most people never even knew existed. So the next time you see a penny, don't rush past it. Don't underestimate it. And don't let familiarity blind you to possibility. Because wealth doesn't always arrive loudly. Imagine this for a moment. Somewhere in America, right now, a small brown penny is sitting quietly in a drawer, a coffee jar, or an old wallet. It looks ordinary. It feels ordinary. And yet, it could be worth up to $873,000. Let me ask you something that might make you uncomfortable, in a good way. What if the most valuable asset you will ever own has already passed through your hands, and you didn't even know it? Stay with me, because what you're about to hear could change how you look at every penny forever. This story begins in 1996, a year most people remember for the Olympics, booming markets, and the early days of the internet. But while America was distracted by the future, the U.S. Mint quietly produced millions of Lincoln 1-cent coins in Denver. And hidden among those ordinary pennies was something extraordinary. A rare error, a mistake so subtle that most people would spend it without a second thought, yet so powerful that collectors today chase it with fierce urgency. This is the 1996 D. Lincoln penny error, a coin that has shocked the numismatic world and rewritten what a common penny can be worth. Now here's where fear creeps in, and I say this respectfully. Most people never check their coins. They assume value lives in banks, stocks, or real estate. Meanwhile, history tells a different story. The greatest coin discoveries are not made by experts under microscopes, they're made by ordinary Americans who simply took a second look. Ask yourself honestly, when was the last time you examined your change? Yesterday? 10 years ago? Never. Because the difference between financial regret and financial victory often comes down to awareness. the 1996 D. Lincoln penny error is not about luck, it's about knowledge. Certain examples from the Denver Mint were struck with rare anomalies that should never have left the facility. We're talking about precision errors that slipped through quality control during high-speed production, when the mint was operating at massive volume. Coins struck slightly off-center. Doubling in key design elements. Unusual metal flow. These are not cosmetic flaws. These are fingerprints of rarity. And when preserved in high condition, the market response has been nothing short of explosive. Here's a quick pattern interrupt. Be honest, how many pennies do you think you've thrown away in your lifetime? Thousands? Tens of thousands? Congratulations, you might be the most generous donor to history's greatest accidental treasure hunt. But don't worry. This story isn't about the past. It's about what you do next. As collectors and investors began recognizing these 1996 D-era coins, demand skyrocketed. Why? Because the supply is brutally limited. These are not modern gimmicks or internet myths. High-grade authenticated examples have commanded attention at elite auctions, with serious buyers competing not for novelty, but for legacy assets. Coins like this are not purchased, they are acquired. And once they disappear into private collections, they rarely return to the market. This brings us to the emotional pivot of the story, the moment where excitement replaces doubt. Imagine discovering that a coin you already own is not just valuable, but life-changing. Imagine the realization that history quietly rewarded you for paying attention. This is why people in their 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s are entering the rare coin market in record numbers. Not because they want clutter, but because they want control. Control over assets that are tangible, portable, inflation-resistant, and rooted in American history. Let me ask you another question, this one resets your focus. If someone offered you a potential six-figure opportunity that costs nothing to investigate, would you ignore it? Of course not. And yet, millions of people walk past that opportunity every single day, jingling in their pockets. The 1996 D. Lincoln penny error has become highly sought after not just for its rarity, but for what it represents. It symbolizes a moment in U.S. minting history when speed overtook perfection. And collectors love imperfection, because imperfection creates uniqueness. Uniqueness creates demand. Demand creates value. This is not speculation. This is how the highest levels of collecting have always worked. As the market tightens and awareness spreads, urgency is no longer optional. The window to quietly discover these coins is closing. Once the public fully understands what to look for, the hunt becomes louder, more competitive, and far more expensive. Those who act early don't chase value, they position themselves ahead of it, and here's the empowering truth. You don't need to be wealthy to participate in this world. You become wealthy by recognizing it. Every great financial story begins the same way, not with money, but with attention. Attention to detail. Attention to history. Attention to opportunity. So tonight, or tomorrow morning, when you come across a 1996 D. Lincoln penny, don't dismiss it. Hold it. Study it. Respect it. Because that small copper coin carries more than Lincoln's portrait, it carries possibility. And in a world where most people are looking everywhere except right in front of them, that possibility belongs to those who are willing to look twice. Imagine this for a moment. Somewhere in America, right now, there is a 1997 D. Lincoln penny sitting quietly in a jar, a drawer, or the bottom of a glove compartment, completely ignored. It looks ordinary. It feels ordinary. And yet, in the right condition, with the right error, that single 1-cent coin has been linked to private market prices reaching as high as $843,000. Let me ask you something that might make you uncomfortable, in a good way. What if the most valuable asset you will ever own has already passed through your hands, and you never noticed? Stay with me, because what you are about to hear could permanently change how you look at every penny you touch. This story begins, like many life-changing stories do, in plain sight. In 1997, the Denver Mint was producing millions upon millions of Lincoln cents, churning them out at lightning speed. To most Americans, these coins were background noise, pocket change, throwaways. But inside that massive production run, a small number of coins slipped through with dramatic minting errors, the kind that seasoned collectors describe as lightning strikes. Errors that should never exist. Errors that instantly transform a 1-cent coin into a six-figure, and in rare elite cases, a near seven-figure asset. And here's the part that should grab your attention. These coins were released into circulation. They were spent at grocery stores. They were handed to children. They were never recalled. Which means the door is still open. Act 1 is about blindness. Not ignorance, but familiarity. When you see pennies every day, your brain stops seeing them at all. Abraham Lincoln becomes invisible. The date becomes meaningless. And the tiny D mint mark under the year. Most people couldn't tell you what it means if you paid them. But that little D is everything. It tells us this coin was struck in Denver, and in 1997, Denver experienced a series of striking anomalies that created pennies with double dies, off-center strikes, misaligned dies, and transitional error characteristics that defy normal mint standards. Collectors don't call these mistakes. They call them miracles. And here's a slightly humorous but painfully true thought. People spend more time checking their phone battery percentage than checking the coins already in their pocket. Don't be that person. Act 2 is where excitement meets fear, because knowledge changes responsibility. Once you know what's possible, you can't unknow it. High-value 1997 D. Lincoln penny errors are not theoretical. They are documented in private sales, high-end collections, and elite numismatic circles where coins trade hands quietly, away from public auctions. The most valuable examples show dramatic visual impact. Strong doubling visible without magnification. Strikes so off-center they look almost fake. Die clashes that create ghostly images, as if Lincoln is sharing the coin with a shadow version of himself. These are not subtle. These are jaw-dropping. And when authenticated and preserved in top condition, demand becomes intense. Why? Because error coins from modern eras are vanishingly rare in high grades. Most were spent, damaged, or destroyed. Survivors become trophies. Here's where urgency kicks in, and I want you to feel this. The supply of these coins is fixed forever. No more 1997 D pennies will ever be made. Every year, more are lost, cleaned improperly, or thrown away. Meanwhile, demand keeps climbing. Baby boomers, Gen X investors, and serious collectors are aggressively moving into rare error coins as alternative assets. They like them because they are tangible, portable, historically significant, and immune to digital crashes. A rare penny doesn't care about interest rates. It doesn't panic. It waits. And the highest-end buyers are not hunting online listings. They are hunting people who don't yet realize what they own. Now let me interrupt you for just a second. Quick question. If someone offered to sell you a winning lottery ticket for 1 cent, would you at least look at it? Exactly. That's what checking your pennies really is. And yet, people laugh it off. Until they don't. Until they see the verified sales. Until they hear the stories of ordinary Americans who found extraordinary coins and quietly changed their financial trajectory. This is not about hype. This is about attention. Act 3 is transformation. This is where you stop being a consumer of stories and become part of one. If you possess a 1997 D. Lincoln penny with a strong, authentic error, you are holding an asset that operates in a completely different universe than face value money. At the top tier, coins associated with values around $843,000 are not casual collectibles. They are status pieces. They are chased by buyers who already have money and want something rare enough to impress other people with money. That is what creates leverage. And leverage is how quiet wealth is built. The most important thing to understand is that condition and authentication are everything. The market does not reward guesswork. It rewards precision. This is why serious sellers move carefully, strategically, and confidently. They do not rush to pawn shops. They do not accept the first offer. They let the coin speak for itself through professional grading and expert verification. When that happens, the conversation changes. Suddenly, you are no longer asking, "Is this worth something?" You are asking, "Who is the right buyer?" There is also a psychological shift that happens here, and it matters. When you realize that value hides in plain sight, you start looking at the world differently. You become more patient, more observant, more intentional. That mindset alone separates people who stumble into wealth from those who consistently recognize opportunity. And let's be honest, it's empowering to know that history, precision, and awareness can outperform luck. So here is the quiet challenge I leave with you. Tonight, tomorrow, sometime soon, take 5 minutes and look. Really look. Check the date. Check the mint mark. Examine the strike. Ask yourself if what you're holding looks just a little bit unusual. Because the people who profit in this market are not magicians. They are simply the ones who paid attention before everyone else did. Imagine this for just a moment. You reach into a jar, a drawer, maybe even your car's cup holder, and you pull out a simple brown penny. It looks ordinary. It feels ordinary. But what if I told you that this exact penny, yes, a 2000 no mint mark Lincoln 1-cent coin, has sold for as much as $847,000? Pause right there. Take a breath. Because if your heart just skipped a beat, you're exactly where you need to be. Most people walk past opportunity every day because it doesn't look like opportunity. And tonight, that quiet little penny may be staring back at you from your own home, waiting to change your financial future forever. This is not hype. This is not fantasy. This is the uncomfortable truth that creates millionaires while everyone else keeps scrolling. The year 2000 was a historic turning point for America, a new millennium, a new era, and behind the scenes at the US Mint, mistakes were made. Human errors. Mechanical errors. Errors that collectors now fight over with the same intensity Wall Street traders fight over blue-chip stocks. And here's the terrifying part: millions of Americans unknowingly spent these coins on coffee, gas, and groceries, while a tiny fraction survived in circulation, hiding in plain sight. If you've ever said, "I wish I had invested earlier," or "I missed my chance," this story is about redemption. Let's be honest for a second. When was the last time you actually looked at your pennies? Not tossed them aside. Not ignored them. Looked at them. If your answer is, "I don't remember," congratulations, you're exactly like 99% of the population. And that's why the other 1% quietly builds wealth while the rest laugh at loose change. Funny how pennies are called worthless, yet one of them just quietly outperformed the stock market, real estate, and crypto combined. Who's laughing now? Act 1 begins with what appears ordinary. The 2000 no mint mark Lincoln penny was struck in Philadelphia, a mint known for massive production numbers. On the surface, nothing about this coin screams rare. That's the genius of it. That's the trap. Because hidden among standard strikes are error coins so dramatic, so unmistakable to trained eyes, that serious collectors consider them crown jewel pieces. These are not tiny scratches or wishful thinking. These are documented, graded, auction-verified errors that redefine what pocket change really means. As collectors began inspecting Millennium-era pennies more closely, shocking discoveries surfaced. Dramatic off-center strikes. Misaligned dies. Broad strikes so bold they distort Lincoln's portrait itself. Doubling so strong it looks like the coin is vibrating. Planchet errors that should never have left the mint floor. Each one tells a story of a system pushed to its limits during peak production demand. And every error represents scarcity. Scarcity creates demand. Demand creates money. Big money. Now here's where excitement turns into urgency. These coins are no longer secrets. High-end collectors, investment funds, and legacy wealth buyers are actively hunting them. Auction houses whisper about them. Dealers watch listings like hawks. And once a coin is discovered, authenticated, and absorbed into a private collection, it disappears, sometimes forever. That means every day you wait is another day opportunity slips through your fingers. Fear isn't a bad thing when it wakes you up. Fear keeps you from missing the moment again. Act 2 is where reality hits. The market doesn't care about effort, it rewards awareness. The highest value 2000 no-mint mark Lincoln penny errors have reached valuations near $847,000 not because they're old, but because they are rare, dramatic, and impossible to recreate. That's what collectors pay for. You can't rewind the mint. You can't reproduce a historic error. Once it's gone, it's gone. That's why demand keeps climbing. And let's be clear, this isn't a someday story. This is happening now. Picture a retiree who once ignored jars of coins now funding a dream lifestyle. Picture debt wiped clean, mortgages paid off, freedom reclaimed, all from something dismissed as spare change. It sounds unbelievable until you realize the numismatic market has quietly created more millionaires than most people realize. And here's a pattern interrupt for you: if pennies are so worthless, why are the wealthiest collectors in America fighting over them? Exactly. The joke isn't the penny. The joke is underestimating it. Act 3 is where power shifts to you. Because knowledge changes behavior, and behavior changes outcomes. The people who win in this space aren't gamblers, they're observers. They slow down. They examine. They verify. They understand that life-changing wealth rarely announces itself with fireworks. Sometimes it whispers from a coffee can in the garage. Sometimes it's been sitting in your family home longer than your furniture. And sometimes, it's already in your possession, you just didn't know how to recognize it yet. This is your moment to pay attention. Not tomorrow. Not when you have time. Right now. Because the longer these coins remain undiscovered, the rarer they become, and the higher the stakes climb. And here's the most empowering truth of all: you don't need to be rich to start. You need to be curious. You need to be intentional. And you need to understand that opportunity favors those who act before the crowd catches on. So the next time someone jokes about pennies, smile. Let them laugh. Because you now understand what they don't. You understand that hidden value rewards those willing to look closer. You understand that wealth doesn't always wear a suit, it sometimes wears copper. And you understand that the difference between regret and freedom can be as small as 1 cent. Imagine this for a moment. You're holding a single penny. Not a gold bar. Not a stock certificate. A penny you may have ignored for years, maybe tossed into a jar, maybe left in a drawer. Now imagine discovering that this ordinary-looking 2005 Lincoln 1-cent coin, with no mint mark, is quietly being hunted by elite collectors, and that the right error version has commanded prices as high as $843,000. Pause right there. Ask yourself, when was the last time you truly looked at your change? Tonight, we're not talking about fantasy or luck. We're talking about awareness. About the hidden economy that exists beneath everyday life. Because while most people are distracted by headlines and noise, serious money quietly changes hands in the world of rare coins. And the 2005 no-mint mark Lincoln penny error is one of the most underestimated modern treasures in American numismatics. This is the kind of coin that rewards those who act early, think differently, and understand how history, scarcity, and timing converge. Act 1 begins with a moment most Americans remember clearly: 2005. A year of economic movement, rising markets, and massive coin production by the U.S. Mint. Billions of pennies were struck, rushed through presses, and released into circulation. But here's the uncomfortable truth the Mint never advertises: speed creates mistakes. And mistakes, when officially recognized, become legends. Somewhere in that flood of copper-plated zinc, a tiny number of pennies escaped with critical errors, no mint mark where one should exist, striking anomalies, die misalignments, and surface irregularities so rare that seasoned collectors still debate how they slipped through quality control. Here's where fear quietly enters the room. Because while you're watching this, someone else is checking their change. Someone else is sending a 2005 penny to a grading service. Someone else is discovering that what looks ordinary to the untrained eye is, to the market, a once-in-a-generation opportunity. And yes, it sounds almost unfair. A penny. 1 cent worth more than many homes. But history doesn't care what sounds reasonable. History rewards what is rare. Now let's reset your attention for just a second. Be honest, how many pennies are in your house right now? 100? 1,000? And how many of them have you ever inspected under proper light? Exactly. That nervous laugh you just felt. That's the sound of possibility waking up. Act 2 is where excitement takes over. Because demand is not hypothetical. The 2005 no-mint Mark Lincoln penny era sits at the crossroads of modern relevance and extreme scarcity. Unlike 19th-century coins locked away in museums, this coin lives in the real world. It can still be found. And that fact alone fuels intense competition. High-end collectors love modern eras because they represent the last frontier, the chance to own something monumental before it disappears into permanent collections. When an exceptional specimen appears, graded at the highest levels and verified as a genuine mint error, bidding becomes emotional. This is where numbers stop being logical. Prices climb not because of metal value, but because of status. Because owning a coin like this isn't just ownership, it's authority. It signals knowledge. It signals access. It signals that you were early when others were asleep. That's how sales approaching $843,000 happen. Not overnight, but in moments where two determined buyers refuse to lose. And let's address the question many people are too afraid to ask out loud. Why would anyone pay that much? Because wealth doesn't chase objects. Wealth chases leverage. And rare coins, especially documented error coins, are portable, private, historically protected assets. They don't depend on banks. They don't crash with apps. They don't need permission. That realization alone has pulled a new generation of high-net-worth buyers into the market, accelerating demand faster than supply can ever respond. Quick humor break: if pennies could talk, this one would probably whisper, "You should have paid attention in 2005." But jokes aside, this is serious business. Time is the silent enemy here. Every year, more coins are discovered, graded, and locked away. Every year, fewer remain unexamined. Urgency isn't a marketing trick, it's a mathematical reality. Act 3 is about decision. About what you do after awareness. Because now you know something most people don't. You know that the 2005 no-mint Mark Lincoln penny error is not pocket change, it's a potential gateway. A gateway to selling intelligently, to entering a market driven by expertise rather than guesswork, and to stepping closer to the kind of quiet wealth that doesn't need applause. This is where inspiration matters. Not because everyone will find one, but because those who do are prepared. They don't dismiss. They don't delay. They verify, authenticate, and position themselves correctly. They understand that value isn't created by hope, but by proof. And when proof meets demand, life changes fast. So tonight, don't rush. But don't ignore this either. Look again at what you already own. Respect the small things. Because sometimes the difference between ordinary and extraordinary is a missing mint mark and the courage to take a second look. The market is watching. Collectors are buying. And history is still being written, 1 cent at a time.